Chapter 6 continued, Part 2.
Sir Arthur noticed that she wore the crystal talisman, and in fact toyed with it nervously as they took their seats. "Mr. Gillette, would you be so kind as to extinguish the candles?" she asked. "Here goes nothing," the actress said, and lowered the candle snuffer on each of the 7 flames on the candelabra. "I must ask for your own safety that once the session has begun, no one is to rise from his chair," Eva instructed them. When the last light was out, Gillette joined the others at the table. "Let us now clasp hands," the medium continued. Houdini took one of her hands, while Bancroft held the other. Sir Arthur sat between Mr. and Mrs. Hyde, who would be sure to boast of this at the next meeting of the Wolsterton Psychical Society. Houdini never made trouble by grabbing mediums or flicking on the lights without warning, as other investigators bent on exposing fraud did. He never left his chair or interfered with their manifestations in any way. Instead, he would simply wait until the end of the proceedings and explain how the trick was done. Typically, mediums shook in their boots when he was on the case. So it was with Mrs. C. now. She could barely keep her knees from knocking. The magician was quite sure of this, and took no small satisfaction because his leg was pressed against hers. She suspected, quite correctly, that this was so he could detect any attempt on her part to get up during the séance or to use her knees to levitate the table. Still, she presented a calm front to their guests. "I must ask all who are present to remain absolutely silent. Clear your heads of all negative thoughts," she ordered them solemnly. Several moments passed, and the only sound that could be heard was gentle breathing. Houdini was aware of Eva's perfume, a fragrance that was impudently provocative, and the remnants of cigar smoke in Bancroft's jacket. Reverend Lassiter's sweaty hand trembled. The reporter broke the silence with his booming voice. "What's supposed to happen?" "Shh!" whispered Mrs. Hyde. The temperature of the room began rapidly to dip. "I can see my breath," marveled Reverend Lassiter. There came a sound like an approaching freight train. The walls began to rattle and the floor shook under them. "Is it a whirlwind?" asked Hyde. "Shall we go down to the storm cellar?" From somewhere in the distance, whether from below, outside, or above, a deep alto voice began to sing the Negro spiritual, "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot." "Did you see that?" "A face!" bellowed the reporter. "I don't see anything," cried Reverend Lassiter. "Where?" He squeezed Houdini's hand fearfully, and the magician winced from the fingernails biting in. "Over there!" cried Bancroft. "Doesn't anyone else see it? An old woman." Houdini looked about, expecting to see a slide of a ghostly face projected on a wall, as he had at 100 séances, but saw nothing. "I don't see her, but I can feel her presence," declared Mrs. Hyde. "I do as well," echoed her husband. "Damn it, there's a hand on my shoulder," cried Bancroft. "Don't get up," Sir Arthur warned him. "Couldn't if I wanted to. It's as strong as a gosh-darn gorilla." Eva tried to restore order.
"Please, all of you, try to remain calm. Spirits of the house, we mean you no harm. We are listening. Tell us who you are." For about 45 seconds there was absolute silence. Then a woman's voice, full of anguish, cried, "We are here, the 13, the lost ones. Please free us." Another voice, male, shouted, "Leave us and don't come back, or the house will claim you too. Save your souls." Eva began to moan. "Oh, oh, oh, oh." Her shrieks were intense, as if she were being suddenly and repeatedly violated. "No, stay out of me," the young medium cried. "What's wrong with her?" cried Bancroft. "Mr. Doyle, should we do something?" "Steady," Sir Arthur said calmly. Shrill laughter filled the room, the mocking cackle of a witch, perhaps emanating from the medium. The high-pitched laughter lasted no more than a minute, though even that was intolerable. Then Eva's spirit seemed to reassert itself. "Pray," she cried, prying her hand out of Houdini's, "for the love of God, Pray now. Release your hands and pray.
Everyone pulled away their hands, interlaced their fingers, and began to pray. "O Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name," Reverend Lassiter cried at the top of his lungs. "Yea, though I walk through the shadow of death," Mr. Hyde sputtered in raw terror. Sir Arthur's voice, forthright and fearless, intoned, "Imprisoned spirits of the house, please permit no harm to come to us."
"Well, I've had about enough entertainment for one night," Gillette announced. "I'm lighting the candles." "I say, what the devil?" Crash! An object struck the wall. "Something tore it right out of my hand," the actor hollered. Mrs. Hyde screeched in horror.
"It's coming for you now," shouted a deep male voice that seemed to echo from all sides.
Eva let out a cry and fell to the floor.
All the others were on their feet and stampeding for the door.
"Open the door. There's a light in the hall," said Gillette.
"I can't see. I can't find the handle," Reverend Lassiter cried. "It's gone."
"Oof!" cried Bancroft as he accidentally bashed into Mr. Hyde. They grappled for a moment.
"Let go of me!"
Hyde shrieked.
"Let go of me!"
Bancroft bellowed in return. Mrs. Hyde screamed,
"The room! We're trapped like those others! We're all going to die! We're going to die!" "Mr. Hyde, please endeavor to keep your wife at ease," said Sir Arthur, by nature immune to panic. "We know only that the room is dark. Everyone tried to keep a level head." "A level head!" Mr. Hyde shrieked. "We're in hell's anteroom!"
Behind them, the door flew open, and they turned to see Houdini standing at the entrance. "It's okay, everyone." The rest of them were gathered on the far side of the room. It became obvious that in the darkness they'd become disoriented. Eva, they saw, was sprawled on the floor, her chair a small distance away from the table. Sir Arthur rushed to her side and revived her.
"My poor dear, are you all right?"
She gasped like a drowning victim suddenly revived.
"That must have been extraordinarily draining for you. What a good deal of psychic energy that spectacle must have consumed."
"It was awful, as if something was inside of me. Something repellent and hateful." Conan Doyle saw that the talisman that hung from her neck was blackened. He shuddered to think of what might have happened if she hadn't been wearing it. Gillette retrieved the candelabra, which was badly bent, from a corner of the room. "Something hurled it clear across the room," Gillette marveled as he brought it back and rested it on the table. "I'm not ashamed to admit I was scared silly. I commend you, Sir Arthur, for keeping the old stiff upper lip." A short time later, the guests of the Peaceful Rest Inn donned their coats and hats at the foyer. Bancroft pumped Conan Doyle's hand.
"What a story I'll have for the paper! This sure was a humdinger. Are all your seances like that?"
The author, perspiring a bit, patted his forehead with his monogrammed handkerchief.
"This might have been a wee bit more lively than usual."
Reverend Lassiter, pale as the proverbial sheet, squeaked out hardly a word before he scurried out. Mrs. Hyde practically had to be carried to the car by her husband, who glared at their hosts on the way out. Gillette was the least frazzled of the invitees as he said so long to Sir Arthur, Houdini, and Eva. "Well, it was a delight meeting you, Houdini, and I'll be ever grateful to you for finding that doorknob," he said, shaking the magician's hand. "Sir Arthur, thank you for an invigorating evening." He took Eva's hand and kissed it. "Madam, it's been a pleasure, and if you ever have the occasion to hold another seance, be sure to throw away my phone number." The alter ego of Sherlock Holmes turned at the door and frowned. "In all seriousness, gentlemen, I really do suggest you clear out of here." When they returned to the hotel in Dunwood, Houdini walked Eva to her room. "That was a crackerjack performance," he said. "All those voices. I'm a pretty good ventriloquist, but I can't throw my voice like that. And what a range! You ought to be an opera singer." Eva shook her head. "I have no idea what you're talking about. When you let go of our hands to pray, you got up from the chair to grab the candelabra and throw it," he said. "You've got a pretty good arm for a dame." Eva scowled. "How dare you accuse me of such a crass thing? Have I offended you in some way? When we unclasped our hands, you moved away from me." "Yes, I felt your leg against mine, And quite frankly, such intimate contact made me rather uncomfortable.
Oh, that's rich, laughed Houdini. I know, because when you got up to go around the table, I moved your chair. That's why you fell and made such a racket. Hope you didn't hurt your keister. She covered her mouth in dismay. I didn't say anything in front of Sir Arthur's guests out of respect for him, he went on.
I see.
She paused for a thought, then said quietly,
Thank you. You had the opportunity to humiliate me, which I imagine would have given you a great deal of satisfaction. I am in your debt. Do you wish to collect right now?
Houdini stepped back, mortified. He shook his head. You can tell Sir Arthur about it, or I will, and that's the end of it. She gave a small smile devoid of happiness.
You are a gentleman, then?
He shrugged contemptuously. You put applesauce on the table. Sure, I smell it, but I've walked through an orchard before. I don't have to taste it. She bowed her head. Her cheeks reddened, those golden ringlets falling about her flawless china doll face. Her beauty made it difficult to revile her.
You've earned the right to insult me, of course, she said. But you should know that, although I did the voices, there were manifestations I had nothing to do with. The coal, the walls rattling, the face Mr. Bancroft saw, none of that was my doing. This I swear.
Houdini smirked. Sure, upon your honor, I guess.
Under the circumstances, I know I can't ask you to take my word.
He shook his head, growing uncertain now. The face that only Bancroft saw.
He doesn't seem like a man given to flights of fancy, does he?
I don't know what he's like, only that he writes for some little hayseed rag I've never heard of. How do I know you didn't recruit him to be a show? Using your charm? Eva bit her lip. Tears began to roll from her emerald-green eyes, and she bowed her head. This isn't as much fun as I expected, Houdini admitted to himself. No fun at all. But damn me if this scheming little fraud, with her loose morals, lies, and crocodile tears, is going to make me feel sorry for her. I just want to know one thing, he said sternly. I just want to know what your angle is. You're not in this racket for the money. Your family has plenty of dough. Your name isn't in the paper, so you're not after fame. She raised her chin and met his eyes.
I suppose I want to feel special. Do you understand, Mr. Houdini?
Her earnest look startled him.
A hunger to be unique, to be number one, to have the spotlight consuming you insatiably.
Oh, sure, I understand, he thought. He smiled ruefully. Harry's fine. She suddenly clutched his forearm.
And I really have felt things. When I was a little girl, when my grandmother died, I could sense her in the house.
Houdini rolled his eyes. Eva sighed and nodded.
Yes, I can't expect you to give any credence to what I say now. Well, now I'm rather tired, so...
He took her hand. Good night, Eva.
Good night, Harry.